Hey guys, and welcome to Coding for Kids. In this video, we are going to be talking about the components of computers. So this is a series, so it's going to be taken in two parts. So this is part one of the series. So I hope you guys like the video, and let's get started. So first, let's look at the overview of this video. So in this video, first we're going to be looking at what is a computer, because that's really important to know the components of a computer. Then we're going to be looking at hardware and software and the definition of those two terms and the differences between those two terms. Then we're going to be looking at the central processing unit, or the CPU. And finally, we're going to end with a CPU diagram. And in part two, we're going to be looking at input and output, the memory unit, types of memory units, and then the control unit and ALU in the CPU. So this is what we're going to be doing in part one and part two. I will go over this in part two, but let's just mostly focus on part one. So first, let's look at what a computer is, because that's really important when talking about the components of a computer. So a computer is a multitasking, programmable device that performs certain tasks with great speed. So for example, let's see how this is true. So let's say we are on a computer. Let's say on one Google tab, you have this video running, and on another tab you might have maybe let's say you have another video running. Let's say you have two YouTube videos on two tabs. Or maybe on one tab you have this YouTube video, and on another you guys might have a game or something. Anything like that. That means your computer is multitasking, and most computers can do that. Even smartphones and iPads and stuff like that, they can all do it. So computers are multitasking devices. Also, they're a programmable device, because we always code on our laptops or computers all the time. We program on it. We always make games. That's how we always made games. We always do it on a computer. We always do it on our phone or a tablet or our computer. We always do it somewhere. And then finally, a computer performs certain tasks with great speed. Because for example, as we learned in the last video about binary code, one letter is made out of 6 ones and zeros. So you can see that a whole paragraph or even a whole video, you can just imagine loading each picture, and there's so many frames in a video. So it's a long process, and it performs it with great speed. It doesn't take 1 hour to load a video, except if your computer is slow, but if you have a good working computer, it performs it with great speed. So this is what a computer is. Now let's go to hardware and software. So hardware is any part of a computer with a physical structure. So basically anything you can touch. So for example, maybe a computer. You can touch the screen. You can touch the keyboard. Maybe the headphones you're using to watch it. Or it could be internal parts like the CPU or memory inside the computer. Software, however, is a set of instructions which tells the hardware what to do and how to do it. For example, Google, as you see on my little image, Google is not something you can necessarily touch. So it's a code that tells the hardware what to do. It tells the hardware that if they search up a word, you need to lead them to these answers and websites. So that is hardware and software. You can think of it as hardware is something you can touch, and software is something that you can't really touch. It's mostly like websites and apps and stuff. So that's the difference between hardware and software. So now let's go on to the central processing unit, or the CPU. So you might have heard of the CPU before because it is a common term we use when talking about computers. So what is the CPU? So you can think of the CPU as the brain of the computer. It interprets and executes most instructions from the computer. So this is what does all the hard work. And also it controls all other components. So it's almost like the boss of everyone. It controls the memory unit, and it also controls the input and output devices. Finally, it accepts binary data as input, and then it processes the data. And finally, it displays the output. So we learned binary data is binary strings are just ones and zeros. So it accepts ones and zeros. The input is going to be ones and zeros. Then it processes the data. It does some math or some code, and then finally it displays the output. So this is how a CPU unit it kind of works like that. And you'll see it on the next slide when we look at the diagram. So you can see that our input would be ones and zeros. So just imagine the input as ones and zeros. Then it goes to the memory unit. And we are going to learn about the memory unit, control unit, arithmetic logic unit, input and output. We're going to learn about that all in part 2. So don't worry if you don't know these terms quite yet. So first there's the input unit. Then we have a memory unit. Then the memory unit goes to the control unit, comes back, and then it goes to the arithmetic logic unit, and it comes back. And then finally, we have our output. So this is the CPU diagram. So let's just review quickly. So we learned what a computer is. We learned hardware and software. We learned the central processing unit. And finally, we looked at a CPU diagram. So a computer is just a device that performs tasks with great speed. It can be programmed, and it is used in our daily lives. It's really important, and it's a multitasking device. So just remember all of those points about a computer. And hardware and software. Hardware is something you can touch, like a laptop or headphones or a microphone, or the internal parts like a CPU. And software is most likely programs and code and stuff. And then the central processing unit is almost like the brain of a computer. It does all the code and it controls all other units. And finally, the CPU diagram kind of told us about the process of the CPU. So in part 2, we are going to be looking at all the parts of a CPU, because the CPU is the most important part in a computer, and we need to kind of break down that CPU to fully understand a computer. So in part 2, we're going to be looking at the input and output. Then we're going to be looking at the memory unit and the types of memory units. And finally, we're going to be looking at a control unit and an arithmetic logic unit, or an ALU, in the CPU. So I hope this video made sense. Thanks for watching. Look out for part 2. It will most likely come next week or somewhere around that time. So hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope this kind of helped you learn a little bit about computers. And don't forget to subscribe and like the video, and also hit the notification bell so you'll be notified every time I make a new video. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!